Welcome once again to The Lost Signals Discusses Games and Gaming Culture, a pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast where we focus on various aspects of video games as well as other issues and topics within gaming in general.
Mantis Falls is a sometimes cooperative game of hidden roles, trust building, strategy, deduction, and betrayal for 2 to 3 players. Players are placed on the dark film noir roads of Mantis Falls. As witnesses hunted for their information, players work to survive the night and escape town alive. Players face dangerous events at every turn and respond to them together, but in secret, making hidden and intricate strategic plays with their cards. Players must often trust and rely on one another, as successful cooperation may be the only way to survive. But this trust is fragile, as not all players may be as they seem. Each game could in fact have only witnesses, in which case players must all survive together. Or there could secretly be an assassin among them, biding their time and waiting for the right moment to move in for the kill. Mantis Falls was made to be a truly uncommonly interactive experience, an immersive, story-driven experience you share with someone, navigating together a world that breeds suspicion and distrust. It's 198 cards filled with all original artwork, the result of 3 years of playtesting and refinement, and now our beloved finished masterpiece. Mantis Falls, a game of trust. Like life, a cooperative game that's only really cooperative. Sometimes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Games, Gaming Culture. I am your host, Steve Ramosi. I'm joined in studio today by Scott Thurlow, and we are joined via Skype by game creators of the new game Mantis Falls, Juli Bierwirth, and Adrian Kerrihard. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having us.
So you two run Distant Rabbit.
Yes. Yeah, Distant Rabbit Games was born out of us making this game, and now
Cool.
we're created a game company out of it. Yeah.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you kind of, Adrian, how you got into game design, and then Julie, I want to hear kind of how you got into illustration and stuff like that, because those are your roles in this game. Julie, let me start with you, because I really love the illustration that went into this. So I kind of want to get your origin story of, like, did you start with art young, or has it been something that you came into, or how did it go?
I mean, kind of young. I would say I was interested in a lot of things. My mom was an artist, and so I did a little bit when I was a kid, but that was sort of her thing. It wasn't until I got into high school that I actually sort of found my own path. My mom does a lot of just landscapes and things like that, and so I really got into drawing animals and people, and something she's always struggled with. So it sort of felt like I at least had kind of my own niche. Objects and landscapes are pretty tough for me, actually, and so this game was pretty challenging in that, because there's a lot of all that stuff. But yeah, I went to school originally for art for my undergraduate degree, and realized that you don't actually need a degree to do art. Switched to other things. And I sort of dropped it for a really long time, found other ways to be creative in my life. But when we were, I've always sort of like found ways to do art one way or another. But when we were working on this game, and Adrian showed me his initial prototype. He was in New Jersey and I was in Georgia, and so he'd been working on this thing, and he was just describing it to me sort of vaguely, and I was like, sure, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sounds really fun. It's a game with some kind of like a road and some stoplights or something like that. And then we played it, and I was like, oh my god, I could do the art for this thing. Like, it just so happens that, like I used to do art and I could do that. And we need, he's using like stock images for all these things. So that was sort of how it came about by doing the art for this. I would not have previously considered myself like a prolific or successful artist in any way other than sort of casually.
Well, I think it really turned out well in Mantis Falls. And I kind of want to ask you the same or a similar question, Adrian. Like, when did you start like wanting to design games, or is that something that you've kind of enjoyed doing for a while, or is it a fairly new thing?
So it's pretty new. So for me, I always started, as a lot of people around like teenage years, I suddenly really wanted to do something creative. I got into music, and I was really trying to write and record a lot of music. And then when I went to school as a film major, and then I was doing soundtrack work and all these things. But it was really like I just really wanted to like create something, and I felt like I had a lot that I wanted to make. Like, and I wrote a novel at one point where I just like actually sat down and I wanted to make this thing. But then, as the years passed and like I finished my film degree and I was still making music, and then I was realizing like this isn't going to be my profession, unless I really take a lot of really risky chances. And so I went down the path of becoming a scientist, father of two, right? And so everything in terms of like making stuff became more of a hobby, like in the back, back. But I would still I made a music studio for myself, and I would try to record music. But it was always this bittersweet thing of like I always knew that I wanted to create a lot of stuff, but I didn't know what it was for, which I think is typical. Like, you make it and you share it with your friends, and that's sort of it. You're like, and then like, now what? Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, like 3 Facebook friends say good job, and then I say like, I guess that counts. Like, I guess I made something. But then it was sort of a convergence of things. Like, I never really thought about game design too much, but this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I guess about 4 years ago now. I was going through a not just stressful time in my life, but like just a grueling, exhausting time in my life where everything else that I would ever want to do, I couldn't do it. Like, I spent 9 months just doing the things I needed to do every minute of every day. And I think inside of me that was just like, oh my gosh, I've got to get back to what's me. And then at the same time, Julie and I were in a long distance relationship, and we were trying to figure out ways to enjoy that. So I would like go online. I would try to find cool board games that we could like play on our phones. And then what I found though is like I'd learn the rules. I'd play the game on my phone, and they're like, okay, we can play this together. And we put it on the speakerphone and we play the game, and we had nothing to talk about while we were playing, right? It was the same. It didn't matter that we were playing it together because we were both just pressing buttons and trying to accumulate points. And so at the same time, I was just sort of beginning to feel like, shouldn't there be like a game where it like really matters who we're playing with, and it's not the same as just playing it by yourself? And so I was sort of thinking along these lines, and then finally I hit this point. I remember, so I'm a food science professor. So it was the end of that first school year where then I was giving final exams, and it was like the first moment I had to breathe. And I just thought, it struck me that this game that I wanted to play with Julie didn't exist yet. And then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so I actually think I want to make it. Yeah. And then it was pretty much all I could do for, a number of years. It was kind of the dominant force, but especially that first couple weeks, it was like all I could do. It was, I was working in the lab at the same time too, but I was like working in a lab here in Georgia, and it was like 1:00 in the morning, and I was still in the lab, and he was still grading papers, and he was in the middle of like, he had like 24 hours to finish finals. And he was like, I have to tell you, I've been working on this game, and like, I want to kind of describe it to you. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it justice, but like, I haven't slept for 2 days, and I designed most of the cards, and I was like, oh my god, like, it was pretty funny. It was like it was intense. Yeah, I would have to leave work at like 8:30 at night or something, and I had to be back at like 8:00 the next morning, and I would be driving home, and I'd be like, okay, if I like eat in the car, and then then I can sit on the computer and I can work on this for like 2 hours, and I can still get like 7 hours sleep or something. And then I would get home and I would start working on the cards, and literally I would just work until my alarm clock went off the next morning. Yeah, man. And it was and then I would go to work, and then I would give the final to the students, and I would sit it while they were taking the final, and I'd just be like still like off the computer writing out notes for how I went. And so it was like, awesome. And like I said, this was like a stressful, intense period of my life. And so it was sort of this thing of like, either I really found something, like I really want to make board games, or, I'm just losing my mind. Like, and it's sort of, was probably, obviously a mixture of both to some degree. But at that point, it's like my big thing was like just even making a game. It's like it's one thing to sort of picture it in your head of like, oh, I want to make all these rules and stuff, but you have no idea if it's going to work at all, right? Like I was going into it with this idea from the first time it would come, I could work 100 hours on it, whatever. We'd play it once and we'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't work. And it was kind of like that. But then the first time we did it, I still sort of saw like, no, wait, there's lots of it that doesn't work, but I can actually sort of see what I would want to do to fix it. Mm-hmm. And then it rolled from there. But it was a number of years since we've been working on it of trying to sort of go from the transition of like, this is just a silly thing that I'm doing to like, this is actually a thing that I've created. Like and we're still, just sort of hitting the crest of that at the end right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a hell of an origin story for the Mantis Falls. So that's really interesting that you came into this kind of not really knowing how to make a game, I guess, and then just saying, hey, I need this game that does this thing for the niche that I need to develop for my relationship, like to be able to talk to somebody else or whatever. And coming into that's really fascinating. I wish that more, I mean, I guess that kind of happens a lot, but like I wish that more games that you sit down and play thought about their players that much, Well,
I think about that a lot. Like we have started like kind of getting involved in the greater community of board game designers and stuff like that. And you see pretty frequently that someone will be like, I want to make this new game and I want it to be sort of like, this app that I saw this one time and, does this work? Does that work? And it's not like really fulfilling a need other than like the need to create, which is totally valid, but it's not really like adding something
beyond that. Yeah.
Like unique to the world of gaming. And I think that need that Adrian was driven by when he was making this game. When he brought it home and we actually got to play it for the first time, there was sometime in the middle of that first game where I was still learning the rules, where I was like, oh my God, he's a genius. Like I can't believe how good this is and my heart was like pounding in my chest. And I was like, I've never played a game that felt this high stakes, this fun, this like interactive, like this is what I was looking for. And I just didn't know it. And I've met other people throughout the game design process too, who are also designing games who feel that kind of like compulsion. Like I have to bring this thing that's in my head out into the world. And then I've met other people who are like, we just need to publish a new game this year. And this seems good enough.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference.
I could see it. I mean, for us, because this has been so much fun, it's like just a different type of thinking that I'd never tapped into before. Like it's really cool to be able to, like, I would have days where I would, go to a museum with people or something, and I just would always just want to go sit down and imagine, like, wait, so if I play this card, they'll play this card, and that. It's just a fun way to go about it. So certainly, I mean, if we're able to be at least sufficiently successful with this to say we're, really doing it, then I want to keep making more games. But the hope would always be that it starts with, that there's something that we really want to play that we can't find, right? And then we go from there. But who's to say how often we'll find that? We've made like 4 or 5 others, well, 3 or 4, I would say, that we've gotten to the point where it's like it's a game in a box. It needs some smoothing out. But for me, still, it's like for all of them, if it ever starts to feel like we're just making a game that works, then it's not. That's not what we're looking for, right?
That's fulfilling. Yeah.
Sure. It has to be something that we really specifically wanted to find.
I wanted to ask you guys real quick because you mentioned on top of that, it's basically a game you made like that, so you guys could. It's a more personal thing, and it says Mantis Falls (parentheses) a game of trust. So I like to share. Steve-O and I are best friends for 20 years now, a long time, yeah. So and we love playing games. So he mentioned I got this game, we're gonna try it out, and if you don't mind, so I like the idea of like visualizing a story, what's happening. So like we're going on the road, like I see it on my mind. So I'll say this: the first game we played, right? I think it was the first one.
Yeah.
We were both witnesses, and I made it to the end of I made it to the very end, like way before he did, and I got the titular falls, and I just in my mind shoved him off the falls.
I mean, he murdered me straight up.
And he was like, "Of course you would do that because that's you." But yeah. It was very fun because it does have that personal touch. Like you said, it matters who you're playing with, like a lot more than it does in a lot of other games you might see.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Is I mean, the game it's built around and if you watch the promo video or something, it's about like there might be an assassin, and there might be a betrayal and stuff, and the whole point of that is to set up really the challenge of trusting people, like, and how difficult that is. Like that's sort of the whole point of the game. Is it's not just a game of backstabbing; it's a game of trying to trust somebody else in the premise where backstabbing is possible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting dynamic, and I really enjoyed it. And it was just funny because it made a lot of sense to us because we were such good friends. I was like, I'm going to do this to you now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, for us, I mean, also, the way I was looking at it is that, life is inherently tactical, right? Like, when people think about the challenges of games, it's like all trying to simulate, to some degree, the challenges that we face in real life. And when people sort of, like, are thinking about like, well, maybe this mechanic would make it go smoother. This mechanic would make it go smoother. Like the way I, was trying to look at it is just always like every time we played a game that wasn't quite satisfying or something, it was, if I was that person, if I was in that situation, what would I actually maybe be able to do? And what would I want? What options would I want at my disposal? Because really nothing is more interesting and complicated than real situations. Right. And I was trying to make it feel as like tangible, real options as
or
possible.
recreate that to the best that you can.
Yeah, exactly. We wonder all the time when we play. Other people aren't going to play like we do.
Yeah, exactly.
We have almost like rules, like unwritten rules that we sort of abide by, or like the the culture of our playing. Where like I imagine other people are going to play this, and they're going to be like, all right, so I guess I'll kill you now. Like,
yeah, it's a long period of time of sort of establishing like what counts as too adversarial or too suspicious, right? Like, and it's completely just sort of built out of our own culture of having played, where it's like if somebody was a new player, they could just be they could be a witness, but they could be completely aggressive the whole time because they're just self-protective. While we've played so many times that it's like we know that if you were a witness, you would be more cooperative than this, right? Yeah, and it gets. It becomes completely different with different players.
But it shifts with us too. Like there's this little oscillation of like, because that that's the culture, you're going to exploit that for your next game when you're the assassin.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that and then the next game that you play, it's going to be a little bit more conservative, and so you kind of like take that into account. Always a running tally in your head of like, what was the last game like, and what are they going to do then this time, and then are they doing more of it than I would expect? It's really.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the card Show of Trust? Does that ring a bell for you all?
Yeah, it rings a bell. I played like 4 rounds, I think.
Okay.
So I'm not like completely.
That goes right to sort of what that was one of the first cards I ever made. That was like the principle of sort of the whole game and the idea was, that it was the card. What it does is instead of just being able to say like I get to see your hand, it was that I will show you my hand, right? And then you have the option of showing me as much of your hand as you want. And the whole point was that's more like if you were really in the situation, you wouldn't just grab someone's backpack and look inside of it. You would instead like open up your backpack and say like, look, like we're having a hard time trusting each other. Like this is what I have. Can you do the same? Right? Like, trying to build it out of that feeling of reality.
We did teamwork a couple of times. We each agreed. We're like, okay, that'll work, and strength in numbers as well.
Yeah.
Right. Like we were pretty good about agreeing to use those when the situations arose.
Yeah. So we played 2 games, and we were both witnesses both games.
Oh, really?
Okay.
So, but it was like I said, the first game he was a lot more aggressive. The second game we were way more cooperative. So even like I love that even if you are both witnesses, and surely you're going to tell the other person that you're a witness regardless, right? So like there's still this like, do I trust him? Like what moves are you making? It's you gotta try and understand the person's psychology going into every round. I was looking at it as like another game I played. I was an assassin, and I was really cooperative early in the game so that later on I could start backstabbing without people like,
yeah, of course you want to.
And I was like,
roll them.
Like, oh no, this horrible event came along and
yeah. Oh, sorry, I have to play this card because it's the only one that works here.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Stuff like that. But it's just a lot of fun the things you can do with it. I'm looking forward to playing a little bit more for sure.
I wanted to play an extra round yesterday. We were like, he was like, oh, we don't have time. Like we got other shit to do. I was like, let's play another round, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm really glad you guys.
It was very cool. And like I said, like to me, like that story built up my mind. Like I was like, all right, I'm escaping this like noir city, and I'm gonna shove you. Like I was like, I'm gonna Reichenbach Falls you essentially because like I thought that like that that was the first game I'd played. Like, he played a couple times with other people, and so he brought it over. And just in my mind, it was a good story to end, even if we didn't win.
Do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah,
we do.
Oh yeah,
we played a lot of other like
a little
tabletop.
bit more like the campaigns that I played of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure.
It was really fun to me, and I was like, "Yep, that was a story in my mind, my friend. I want to shove you off the titular falls."
Yeah.
Sorry.
The noir thing also. I mean, it was born out of us. I like film noir, I guess. Like, I like the idea of mystery or whatever, but it wasn't like anything I'd ever really given a lot of thought to. And then it was just sort of in the genesis of this idea. It took me about like 5. Once I sort of had this idea of like, maybe we're on the same team, maybe we're not. The first thing that came to my mind was obviously the scene of the witness, and then there's another witness that's coming to join you, but you don't know if you can trust them, right? And that was pretty much it. And then we just sort of built it out of it. But I think we found like a lot of inspiration in that setting. Like, it felt very real to us. We found it took a while sort of going through like playlists and stuff, but we found like music that's just like this beautiful, like dark, haunting film noir music, and we would listen to it as we made the game, we'd listen to it as we drew the pictures, as we did the play tests. And it took on a very real feeling for us, I think, after a while. It felt.
Yeah, I'll say, so Steve, he was like, yo, check out the music suggestions they have. And it was like Twin Peaks soundtrack, like awesome. And like Sunset Mission, I was like, no one else has ever heard of it. I can't believe like someone but it fits really well. I believe we listened to the first game we played, we did Twin Peaks, then I did Sunset Mission the second game.
Actually, I wanted to ask, so the name Mantis Falls, is that kind of a play on Twin Peaks, or is that like something? It's
an homage to that sort of way to make a title in general. The Twin Peaks. There's also like Mulholland Drive. At the same time, there was like
what was that TV show?
Yeah, Wayland Pines or Wayland Pines, something like that. So originally the game was just a game of trust, because that was, to me, I mean, that was like, we wanted the game to be fun. There was definitely sort of a philosophical underpinning of sort of the way this mirrors so much of our life, like the challenges that we face trying to, we need each other, but we also fear each other, and how we sort of weigh those two things against each other. So to me, I thought a game of trust with this sort of haunting artwork felt haunting, right? And that was basically the main comment we got from everybody, was like, I hate that game. So, so took it to heart, because to me it felt implicitly haunting, that sort of that challenge of trust. While to other people it sounds like, you're saying a game of life or something, which is obviously, just mundane. So then, and then also in this day and age, like trying to come up with a new name for anything, we found you can pretty much put in any 2 words you could imagine. And there will be some city that's already has that name, or some, song that already has that name or something.
Yep.
So I mean, I remember I was at an airport. A lot of it, you can sort of see it throughout the game, is we try to use animal mythos, or like metaphors for different things about the things that people do to each other. So I remember sitting in an airport just looking up, like on discoverychannel.com or something, animals that betray each other, right? And one of them was the praying mantis, and then I just worked from there. And then Mantis Falls just sounded right, and then the idea that when you get to the end, that you can get pushed off of that waterfall and stuff. So that was, I mean, it was sort of just, contrived out of sort of a strategy, but definitely it was an homage to like Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, things like that.
Yeah, awesome. We're all about that.
I actually wanted to ask, so you mentioned the artwork and the haunting artwork earlier. So what, like, Julie, what kind of inspirations did you take when you were making the artwork?
I have a very specific style that I sketch in. And so when we were very first initially talking about making the art for this game, I think I started with maybe like the bullet or the gun or something like that. And took a long time, sketched it all out by hand. And Adrian was like, that is it. Like, that's the, and I think it came down to sort of this, like, back in the day when you would go through like an encyclopedia or like a medical journal or something like that, and be, here's this like sketch of this body part, or here's this sketch of this thing. And they were all sort of like, cross-hatched pen and ink drawings. And so we're really kind of going for that like haunting creep horror factor of like, if you were to decorate your house for Halloween, maybe you'd like do all of these like black and white sketches of anatomical things. And so that was sort of like, it made it, because we have this gigantic deck of action cards made it so that, that was an approachable goal with illustrating for all of them, because, we talked about doing like full color illustrations for all of them. And it's like, I don't know, something like 80 color illustrations, which is a heck of a lot for someone who's, full-time employed. So that was part of it. And I don't know, it just sort of happened to work with my style and happened to work with the game.
Yeah, it was maybe just a really nice happenstance that it happened to work, because if the first game that I wanted to make, had been something that every picture had to be, some full color oil painting or something, then I think it just would have been infeasible. Like, we had too much self-doubt through the process of whether or not this was actually leading to anything of value or something. And the fact that, with the film noir, there couldn't have been anything more perfect than those sketches that sort of just sit in the card instead of making it feel too separate from the card itself and the graphic design of it. So, but it was cool for us also. It like really evolved. At the beginning, it had just sort of like a typical like guns, bullets, grenades, like this sort of typical film noir thing. And then as we were coming up with these different ideas, and then suddenly it's like we make like Pied Piper, which is this mouse that can, that has this, I guess, a little flute next to it, and things like that. And then like we're like Reckless Abandon with like the birds flying away or something. It started to morph from sort of a homage to typical film noir into this sort of unique world that was getting created. And
almost like if you were watching a movie back then, like the cutscene,
Exactly.
like when you're watching the protagonist about to run away from things, you might see like a cutscene of a bunch of birds flying, and that would be like the metaphorical. So it was like, those moments. And then Adrian found all of these really awesome, like Show of Trust with a hedgehog.
Yeah, you guys familiar with the Hedgehog's Dilemma?
Yeah,
you are. That's the reference there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're like, some of these are going to be real obscure. People are going to have no idea what we're talking about.
It depends, but like. We like to think of ourselves as pretty big nerds, so like, got that one. But it's very cool that like you included it. So I'm sorry. I was to say like, it also becomes sort of a shorthand. So one of the things like strength in numbers is a wolf pack essentially, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what I thought, like, once I got familiar with it, I'm like, if you played enough, you just can look at it. You can look at the image and be like, I know what card it is. Yeah. Which then like it sort of makes it easier to strategize because you don't have to think about it as hard. Like, all right, I know what I have. It's the bull or whatever, or the wolf. And the ducks, whatever it may be. So like it was really helpful. And you said, Julie, that you sort of specialized or preferred drawing animals, or like was sort of like better for you in a sense.
Oh yeah,
so that's really cool.
The ones that really gave me grief were the beginning of the road and the end of the road. A lot of landscapes, a lot of like architecture styles and stuff. And that's I have a hard time feeling creative when it's like everything has to be right angles and and so a lot harder to inspire. But I really love drawing like organic shapes. So all of the silhouettes for the allies were really fun to draw for me.
Those are noir as hell and they're awesome. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. They're all of the animals were really fun to draw. Even like a lot of the objects were really fun too. It's the landscapes.
And it was, we're obviously so, have this deep personal relationship and stuff. So we were able to collaborate on that so thoroughly in terms of just even like what to draw or how it should be conveyed or something. Like I would come up with an idea for what I needed a card to do. And then I would like pull the thesaurus and say like, I can see like these 10 different, metaphorical references that, possibly bring it to life. And then she could sort of decide what of those she wanted to draw or how she wanted to depict it. A lot of times like repetition was just, completely her creation, and also
I was like,
considered a variety of things like that where there were a few where it's like I know what I need this card to do. I have no idea how to convey that visually.
Yeah. The repetition. I was like, oh man, the like cutout.
It's so beautiful.
Like the doll cutout. The holding hands. I was like, that's a creepy image. So I cut one out of paper, put it on the floor, watch the shadows go across it, and then like sketched it.
That's awesome.
Like that. Like that like the little stick figure people just being pulled out on a piece of paper. The moment she drew it, it was like, yes, that's creepy. With the word, it's all just like creepy. And I can't even think of another context in which that would have been portrayed as creepy, right? But it just so right. Like somehow something about that
perfectly fit for that.
Yeah. I wanted to, before we go on to another question, I just wanted to mention when you were talking about kind of the cross-hatched illustrations and stuff, it really does remind me of almost like a notebook, like a noir, like somebody's like taking notes and like putting these like little illustrations in a notebook, almost like what was that show that McConaughey was in, True Detective, his character like sketching things in that. So I got kind of that kind of feel from those cards. So that's
I think
really cool.
I think it makes it feel, if we'd done like these like brilliant all color beautiful, like if you've ever played was it Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, it has like 1,000 items and they're all these beautiful full color illustrations and stuff like that, and it's absolutely stunning. The art is glorious, but it doesn't feel as like personal. This
bit maybe
you took on your journey,
Right. Well, and that was the most consistent note that I think I gave her in terms of like when we were trying to figure this out is I would keep telling her like, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, don't like make it less perfect.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, like it doesn't need to look like a clock. It needs to look like a clock that you.
Yeah, more like a sketch of whatever it may be. Yeah. It's almost like, to me, I was going to mention as well, like sort of in the same vein, like Sherlock Holmes little like sketches or like lithograph almost kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's
in a
sort of
sense.
style.
Yeah. All right, cool. I wanted to ask also kind of, so you mentioned the Hedgehog's Dilemma. Are there any other cards or parts of the game that you're particularly proud of or thought they were like clever pop culture or like other kind of reference that you bring
everyone
up to
may
people?
not get, but if they do, it's a little like nice surprise or something.
Pop culture reference. I would have to sort of look at the cards maybe again to see.
Yeah.
At one point, I mean, I think in terms of clever things like little look-see or something, the idea sort of like catch a glimpse and the other person doesn't quite know what to make of it. Pied Piper has always been my personal favorite, just sort of that metaphor, just sort of that image of, you benefit now, you pay for it later. I mean, in general also, and it's not supposed to totally answer your question, but it was endearing to it's like a walk back through human history to think of all the different times that people have tried to convey emotions through metaphor already. Like, because every time it's like, oh, I'm feeling this and I want to do this. And it's like, oh yeah, well, 100 years ago, somebody decided that is associated with a crow, right? Or that it's associated with, the mole. Is like the moment we create a card where you're able to burrow in and see something, then it's like, oh yeah, that's a mole, right? People
obviously,
there was something that felt actually sort of gratifying into sort of the connection to history with that people have created those images sort of for us to just find. And like she's pulling ones off, like Chameleon, it ended up being like a really nice one, the one that can mold into anything, or Down the River, right? The idea of sort of the world with Mantis Falls and but I mean, I think
there are a few
that are pretty abstract, like Duck. The idea that you're like ducking away from something, pretty abstract, right? But or Badger, right? Where it's like
Badger's a good one.
We're compelling the other person to move, and the idea is you're badgering them to do so, because like what else are you going to draw for something like that? But it felt like it worked, I would say. At one point, I was trying to shoehorn in a series of Cyndi Lauper references into the
Oh my god!
I don't remember why that ever started.
The True Colors. And
right. Because it ended up getting. It didn't make the cut.
It was on the cutting room floor.
But there was a card that was called True Colors, and then I started looking at a lot of Cyndi Lauper song titles, and I was like, I think we could, squeeze in like 3 more. But it didn't happen.
Probably for the best.
You got to explore avenues, and they might not all work, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, going on from there, do you have any plans to do any other fiction based in this world? Or because we were playing, I was like, this would make a great, novel or a comic or, just like even a book of the art from the game would be really cool.
I mean, when we were first sort of like getting finished with this and thinking about it, one of the great pieces of advice that we got from with this these couple guys that make games around us, Keymaster Games. They just came out with Parks is their like biggest release recently, and huge success. But when we first started working with them and doing like playtest nights and just they've been giving us advice on the whole process, which is awesome. But they were saying like world building is really where it's at. Like what you have here is you've created a world. and people want to live in it. And the more you can, like, you have postcards that are like from Mantis Falls, and you have, you know, like people want to know more about that world. And so as I've started to think about that, this was before, like they talked about that before I started doing the full color illustrations for what Mantis Falls looks like. And so I was like, had like paralysis as an illustrator. I'm like, it matters so much how I build this world, because this is how people are going to envision it. And like,
Sure.
you know, like, but ever since then, yeah, I think about like, you know, what do these city streets look like? And who are the people that live in this town? Like we have a pugilist and an urbanite, you know, the people that you can play on the cards. And like, what are their days like? What is the urbanite like? Where's that person going to work, and where are they coming back from? What's their commute back like in this really dangerous town where like there's people around every corner? And so, I mean, I don't think we have any plans of that kind yet beyond just publishing the game.
Right.
Yeah, I think we sort of have, I mean, for all of this, we're just now hoping and transitioning from being like, you know, hopeful game makers to feeling like, and I mean, and for me, it would be like, the hope is part of the reason we invested so much time and energy into this is to cross that threshold just in general, in terms of feeling like it's possible to create art that, you know, will have some value. Like, and if we can cross that threshold, then the hope is to then just spend the rest of our lives rolling with it, you know, one way or another, like whether it's just to have the confidence to make more games. And I mean, like the way I describe the process always is like, when I really get invested in something, and I still, you know, I'm like working on music a lot and stuff, like there's so much of me that gets invested in what I'm doing. And there's always this thing in the back of my mind saying like, just so you remember, this is a waste of time, right? Like it doesn't really matter that you're doing this. And if we could switch over where we now can turn that part of our brain on and say like, yeah, we're actually making something. Right. Then for me, it's like, I don't know exactly what that would mean for us next, but it could be anything. Like if we wanted to explore game making, sure. And we want to, but if there was room for us to build out this world in some way, like I would be happy doing that for the rest of my life. Right. Like, I feel like because what we found is every time, like we said the game was done because it's done. Like we had it the way we wanted it. But it's like, if somebody said like, now there's a market for 3 expansions, like, I feel like I know what those expansions do within a day. Like, we just sort of kept finding that there's more and more room for this to become something else and bigger. And I'd love to have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I mean, what he was talking about in terms of like that self-consciousness, it's a crazy thing, but like we both have full-time jobs. We're raising kids. You know, we're like trying to be reasonably well slept and healthy people occasionally.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, so you have all these things to do for work. You have all these things to do with the kids. They're like wanting to spend good quality time and everything. We have like spare moments here and there around the edges where like I can get an illustration done and Adrian can work on the card design and layout and stuff like that. And it's like, if you're feeling really good that day, then yeah, like you'll like stay up for 4 hours and get barely any sleep and get it all done and like be excited about it. And then the next day you're like, you know what? Like, who knows? Like, what's even going to happen with this? Are we ever even going to go anywhere with this? Is it going to get published? And it's like, where do you get the motivation then to say like, I'm going to forsake my job and I'm going to forsake my sleep and I'm going to like make sure that I get all this done.
Well, and it comes up all the time. If like the next day you're at work and someone asks you how you're doing and you say like, I'm really, really tired. and the reason why is because I spent, you know, logged like hours 10,000 through 10,005 on this game that nobody else exists. Or like, what did you do this past weekend? And it's like, oh, it was a lot of work. Like I was trying to get the action card layout to look just exactly right, you know, and it is, it's always sort of like that, that balance of like, I know that I want to do this. I know that it feels important. Like I just wanted to actually, be something real.
But if there were actually like a market for it where people are like, oh man, we love this. Like, can you create an expansion? Can you then it's like, okay, yeah, I'll not sleep for like 4 weeks straight.
For sure.
Like, sounds great.
Yeah, it'd be really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that game. That's like us with our podcasts. We're like, what is that anyway? But it's something creative and an outlet. And if it takes off, it takes off. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally feel that though.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of briefly go back to the game. So like we played the game. We only played scene events because I didn't want to, I played with new people most of the time. So I was like, let's just make it simple. We're going to look at all the events. But I wanted to ask you kind of how unseen events change the dynamic since I didn't really get to experience
next
it.
time. Next round, we're going to play Unseen Events.
Okay. Yeah, it changes things pretty thoroughly, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, because what it does is it just creates, like, the game comes down to basically that one big pivotal moment. Like, the whole time, the assassin is waiting for that sort of fleeting moment where everything comes together and this is the moment to strike. Like,
yeah.
And certainly, I mean, and having been the assassin, it's like you're always sort of playing in your head, like, if I do it right now, I think I could have like a 60% chance of winning. But like, no, I think if I wait, I can make it better. And like, you're trying to sort of find that moment. And for the witness, which happens every time you play a game, you have a 2/3 chance of being a witness. Like, for the witness, the entire time is you're trying to anticipate and protect yourself against that moment that might be coming. And so what the unseen events do is just really ratchet up how often that moment seems possible, right? Because every time somebody draws an unseen event, there's that level of uncertainty of what really is going on. Like, for all they know, this is the event that deals 4. Like, if it's an event that deals 6 wounds divided among the players, and the assassin is going to play a ricochet, which means that all the wounds go to the other player, right?
I like ricochet as a card as well.
Right, and so all that takes is, for that situation to be scary, all it takes is for the assassin to possibly have one card in their hand, which is always the case, right? And for them to have drawn an unseen event, and for you not totally to trust what they're saying, right? So that moment feels like sort of omnipresent.
There's this unseen. I don't know if you can see this here, but there's this unseen event called the Whistling Wind.
We drew that yesterday. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
So as a scene event, that would be a sort of nothing card.
We were like, all right, nothing happened.
Turn, basically, right?
But as an unseen event, especially, it's like, because it's the easiest thing you could possibly bluff as an assassin. You draw the card and you say, oh yeah, nothing happens, right? And the point is that it's true, but how on earth is that other person going to believe?
Then what? Yeah, exactly.
No, like it's a there have been a lot of times, and because that's in the deck, as you get used to playing the game, because you know it's available to you, you can use that as a bluff, and like you can say, oh, it's a whistling wind, and the other player looks at you and they go like, really, is it? Like, and so that feeling always of like, I mean, a lot of those in there you probably recognize, even from the scene cards. Some of them will say like, it deals wounds between 1 and 3 divided into right, like or the amount that you choose to. So they're the unseen ones where you can just pick it up and say, that was sort of our way of like helping people bluff. Is that you just get to say like, just 3 wounds to you, like and you don't have to lie. You don't have to tell the full truth either. And so it creates all these opportunities also for the assassin to sort of, without being suspicious, erode your
that's a good point.
Because if you have a scene event and you say like, I'm giving you 3 wounds, then it's like, okay, so you're an assassin. That's great. Like, but with the unseen one, you can do it pretty handily.
Yeah, and it's very easy. I mean, then you can also present the premise of like, if you draw the unseen event and you say like, oh man, this is a really bad one. What are all the most powerful cards in your hand? Like, we're going to need, your most powerful play. Use it up right now. What does the witness do in that situation? Like, even if they do it, then they'll never know for sure if they even had to, right?
Yeah, because you'll be like, you prevented the event.
Yeah, so it definitely shifts things more probably in the assassin's favor, having the unseen events. That's part of the balance game. But it was also, that was just one of the very first, back to when I was that period of time where I wasn't sleeping at the very beginning. Like, that was right there at the genesis of the game, was that sort of idea. And again, just because it sort of felt real.
True.
Like, if you were in a situation like this, that sometimes there'd be things that you could anticipate together, and sometimes there'd be things where you have to take the other person's word for it, right? And then you're trying to get that feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's a really cool mechanic for sure.
I also wanted to ask. So we didn't play any of the 2-player modules. I played Triad once, but we didn't play any of the 2-player modules outside of that. So like, kind of take us through what those. So Triad is the 3-player one. So if you want a 3rd player, play Triad. But kind of what do the other 2 modules do?
So Full Circle was the original game. This was our intention for the original game, was to include the Full Circle. The thing that we noticed when we play tested with people who were brand new to this style of game was that if you haven't,
steep learning curve.
And especially like, because you have to know what the cards are and what they do. So there's a lot of reading. So people tended to do really well with like, a knife, a gun, a bullet, like, being able to look forward through the deck or something, or back through the deck. But if you were given the opportunity, for example, to look forward through the deck and pick out any card you want from what's available, well, then like you're brand new to the game and you're sitting here looking through maybe like 50 or 60 cards and trying to pick what's best for you when you have to read every single one. So there were just a lot of things where it sort of made sense to kind of like slowly step up the difficulty level.
But if you haven't played with Full Circle, then do it, right? That was my biggest. So the real game is when you're playing with Full Circle. Like as far as
we're gonna try that.
The mechanics exist without it, but where it really shines in terms of like all the options that we wanted people to have, that includes Full Circle. The only reason we took it out, and I mean, time will tell. It could even have been a mistake, but and I think what a lot of people go through also when they make a game is we were sharing it with, friends and friends of friends and family of friends and people who didn't necessarily have like a lot of gaming in their blood at that point. And we just got tired of it feeling like too much for them that first time. So we decided, basically without Full Circle, we sort of feel like the training wheels version. You learn the game, you learn the mechanics, you see how it works, but you put Full Circle in to make it real. That's why we call it, have the word full in it, as we're sort of trying to say like that's the full experience. The other one, Vanish Creek, that's just a wrinkle, because we've played it so many times, and it's built where that deck is not just like oftentimes card games have decks, and you sort of live with what you draw. For us, the whole deck is available to the players one way or another, sort of as you go through the game, and the hand you build is built out of the options that you have there. So Vanish Creek is just a way to randomly remove some cards, basically, more through the game, like actually take them out of the game, because just even one card can shift the whole dynamic. Right. So it's just a way to make it, absolutely for sure. You could play it thousands of times and it would never be the same game, right? That's it. Yeah, but Full Circle is the one that's
First Circle's like the level up sort of version, if you will.
Yeah.
Nice. And then I wanted to like one more about like specifics of the game here. The allies, based on anybody you know.
It's a good question.
Yeah, our friends are basically like,
all like conniving,
fancy photographer, butler working behind people's backs.
I mean, again, it's a lot of these ideas now seem like sort of just normal. Like you look at a game and it's like, oh, yeah, there's allies, there's tools and stuff. It is sort of funny to think about how integral it felt initially, sort of just to the story of it. Like, I don't remember why, but I mean, yeah, it's like so much of it has changed since the start. But like those little phone booths on the road cards, like that was that's like one of the roads and the bus, or the phone booths and the bus stops were like two of the main things that existed to make the world feel real to me. And I was like, and the idea that you would use that phone to call allies or something just made sense, and it also made the world feel more dynamic and friendly in some way. It's like it's not just a horror game. It's sort of supposed to feel a little real. Like you do have people that you can count on. You do have friends you can make and ways you can try to navigate this, instead of it just being like you're in a dark world that wants nothing but death for you.
Right.
Yeah, and then so then that was sort of teetering as like one of the integral ideas. And then by the time I was realizing I needed to do something to make it so the witness had an advantage in case the assassin outed themselves too much. And then when I had the idea that you would use the phone booth to call in a hit on them, then it was like, that's a good one. Like that's going to stay.
It's a solid mechanic. It works.
Yeah.
We were a little worried, like it's a mafia, themed game and everything. And so there's definitely like a legacy of like Italian names throughout it. And so, we're trying to make sure that we were being, I don't know, not like like mafia and Italian culture are like pretty well tied in popular culture.
Sure.
But it also, it's funny because it's weird because it is like the mob, right? I never even really think of it as a mafia game. I always think of it as a film noir game somehow. Like, but those, but that was certainly the type of thing she and I would talk about a lot. Was again, you'd sort of start with an effect maybe that you wanted to have happen, but then try to picture who that would be and what that little like subtitle would be, like the person with connections, the person with volition, like you're trying to figure out what made sense and how then she would draw that person. I think like the one with
I think there's the man with all the ideas, or the man with the planner, or something like that, if I recall correctly.
Well, and then she would come up with ideas of, like the one who could do that would be like a waiter, and just like subtly implying that they're like in important places, picking up information that you wouldn't expect them to be privy to and stuff. Yeah. So so fun with that for sure.
Very neat. It all that ties in a bit to the world building. Like it makes sense,
of course.
Like there's a reason for what this character would do and why they're in this place at all, and giving you the aid that they're whatever effect is happening.
Yeah, it was the man with admittance, right?
Yeah.
The
Butler.
Yeah, that's then a butler. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that in terms of in general for game design. Like I just went to a game design convention, my first sort of experience like that.
Oh, cool.
A lot of games are interesting, and it's like blows it up for me and sort of like all the different mechanics people are exploring and all the things that like it's a different way for me to look at it. But I was thinking about it. Well, time will tell. But I feel like I can't really imagine making a game that wasn't protagonist driven. Like I feel like there's something to in our game we're trying to not go overboard on the material expense or anything. So we just have these little figurine things that aren't really much. But just the idea that that's you feels like so fundamental sort of to the experience that like who you are in this world. Yeah.
Versus like patchwork or something like that where you're like building a quilt or built.
Yeah, or just strictly tactical.
Yeah.
Having the entire fleet or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just kind of off the cuff, but do you guys find that the red character is the first one picked by everyone? Because it seems like that's the way it's going.
It's pretty popular, I think. Yeah.
Every single time I've played,
makes sense to me is all.
I'd be like, what color do you want? Red every single time. The first one.
Really?
Well, it's funny. We got that. So the box design was actually like relatively recent.
Yeah,
so
that was
this,
towards the very end.
The red with the tan on top. And one of the comments that we got back from our friends at Keymaster was that's like including those shocks of red all over the game is just keep going with that because we have anytime we have a condition or sometimes like there's a little
the sometimes stuff
in red, and then our little cards for our expansion sets are all, and that little burst of red is like not too much, but just enough that it reminds you almost like of the stakes of the game. Like it's got this.
It's like just visceral enough to keep it on the level.
Yeah, things are coming for you.
Yeah. And I love the design. Like right on you have your tagline right on the cover of the box where it says, like life cooperative game that's only really cooperative. And then sometimes in red, it's like the perfect. Like you were just talking about it. Like
that
it really draws the eye.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it. That was. I don't know if I ever took feedback earnestly from anybody on that because that was probably like the second thing that was there right at the very beginning for me that I wanted that in there and I think I wouldn't have even listened to anybody who
it's a great core concept and it's a good mirror.
Right. And I mean to me not to get too philosophical about it but I mean that really was what the game is about is like that life is inherently it's our challenge of like we need each other. We're compassionate to each other. We're generous to each other, and then we're also fearful of each other, like all the time, like in big ways and small ways. And it feels like it's sad and it's tragic, but it's also awesome. It's like sort of the greatest tactical challenge we face in life. And in playing games, it always felt. I think it always felt like that was missing. It's like every part of life. You're negotiating that sort of struggle of like how much generosity is too much, how much vulnerability is too much. And then you sit down to play games and suddenly you're told before you even open the box that like, oh, this person's on your team or this person's your enemy. And that just felt not real to me. Right. And and so this certainly felt sort of metaphorically important, right? Yeah, and that idea that life is like a cooperative game, really, because we obviously none of us could do this alone. But the fact that we can't makes us all vulnerable to each other all the time.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a hedgehog's dilemma, right? Which is why.
Yep.
The thing that was very surprising to me when we did like sort of our market research for this game is that so there's a category of gaming called semi-cooperative games, and they're pretty different actually from what this is considered. I was surprised there weren't more games where you don't know if you're playing a cooperative game or not, and that's sort of what I felt like was really unique and special about this is that there are plenty of games that are cooperative, there are plenty of games that are competitive. There are semi-cooperative games where it's like if you lose, if the whole
Or
group
it's like,
loses, then the
then
person who loses least wins.
Yeah.
But if you win, you all win together, right? So you're like looking out for yourself, but also looking out for the group. You're really kind of doing both. I've been very surprised that this is not a bigger deal playing a game.
Genre.
Yeah, because like in any social deduction game, there is a traitor. Like there are traitors. If you play games like Resistance or Secret Hitler or Werewolf or something like that, there are traitors and you're trying to flush them out. This, where it's like, is there a traitor? Is there not? Shoot, like, are we together or are we not? I don't know. And how intimate it is. It's
certainly creating this, any creative project, but certainly when I go back to the first songs I ever made or something, there's like that period of fear at first where it's like you first feel like you don't have to make anything worthwhile. Then when you begin to feel like you are, then you're afraid you're going to find out that someone else made the exact same thing first or something.
Yeah.
I certainly can't say that it's entirely unique. Like, I don't know. Like, there could certainly be other games that have very similar.
I'm not familiar with any at all. Yeah.
I haven't found any really yet, which is surprising.
We've been given some suggestions of ones that there's a few we still need to play, but where there's like you have the option of putting in a traitor, or most of them are not the 2-player games. 2-player social deduction is seemingly, because I was looking all over forums, all over Reddit, all over Board Game Geek, and everyone was saying like 2-player social deduction, is that a thing? And all the responses were like, idiot, of course it's not. How would you do 2-player social deduction? The traitor is stupid. Like, and I was like, oh man, like maybe we've actually like sprung upon something. And there's people love that type of social deduction, but when you go home with your intimate partner, you hang out with your best friend, like when are you going to get a chance to do those games unless you got 5 or 6 people that get together?
Yeah,
that's a good point.
All right, so I got a couple other things here that I want to get to for sure. The first being, I was reading about the company, Distant Rabbit, and you guys are carbon neutral, correct? And so who you're collaborating? That's great. That's awesome that you're doing that. Who is the company that you're collaborating with? I didn't put it down in my notes here, but
myclimate.org. It's just basic carbon offset. So we pay per game produced. We also pay when we shipped over to you guys, that was paid for, carbon offset for that shipping cost. And it comes out to 5 cents, like a game, sometimes less. It's nothing. Or not for the for shipping, for the game. For the production it's more, but it's they basically they went through and calculated based on what the game is, and then where we're going to be shipping it to and from, and where it's being manufactured, a cost per game. But the idea is we're paying them and they're paying some larger, I don't know, like coal manufacturing plant or something like that.
It's pretty interesting. I'm not an expert on it, but basically that money goes to then other people would be on the other end, where they take that money to improve the carbon output.
Their emissions.
Right. So if you ran a farm, they would say like, well, I'm not going to just spend a ton of money to make my farm more environmentally efficient, but if enough people pay me to do it, then I'll do it. Right. So we're buying into it so that our carbon use is offset. Right. And we were trying to do some whole minimalist design thing with all of it. Like it could hurt us, if we ever get our game in a game shelf. It'll look small for what we've put into it, right? But we sort of did this thing of like, we don't need heavy plastic inserts. We don't need a big box. Like a lot of the things in the game could have been done with like big elaborate tiles or something. But our feeling was like, if we can do it on a card, right, we're making it cheaper, we're making it more efficient, we're making it more environmental. And the hope would be that it would sort of stand out on people's shelves where like they could grab, if we're so lucky as to make like 6 games, right? You could grab all 6 and take up the same amount of room as one big box, and then you have like thousands and thousands of hours of gameplay there. So
I will say like the box really stands out, just the shape and size of it, and obviously the art and design of it on the front there. Yep. But you also cram a lot into this little box. There's a lot of cards. There's a lot of stuff going on with this game. You fill a table basically when you have it all set up.
Yeah.
So that's really impressive that you can take all that.
We've gotten criticized for that. Like I talked to other board game producers, and they were like, "What's your size and what's your planned MSRP?" And they were like, "That's right at the edge of like too expensive for that small box." And I was like, "Well, but we're not going to compromise on that. We're not going to make a box bigger, make the shipping more expensive, all of that just so that people look at it and they're like, because they're not getting any more for it at all, and all it's doing is hurting everyone along the line, making your shelf fuller.
Yeah. Hopefully it resonates adequately. That sort of, because that it is a template for us going forward. We would like, our vision would be that, that little size box could be, like a growing collection that would be same size and shape, same type of drive towards efficiency. Because for me, it's like, we'll take our kids camping or something, and like space is tight in the car, and it's like, oh, what game am I going to bring in? There is sort of this cost of like, well, I can bring this small game, but we're going to play it 2 times and they'll get boring, or we could bring this like really giant game that's going to take up a bunch of room in the car. And the idea that there could just be this little thing that would fit in your backpack that you could play hundreds and hundreds of times and still enjoy it, like, it just felt like a cool thing to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very awesome.
So that's great. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, do you have definite plans for the Kickstarter at this point, or are you still getting that together? Because I know you mentioned that probably 2020, early 2020.
Yep. We're thinking it's April 31st, 2020, something right end of April-ish.
April 2020 is what we've been saying.
Yeah.
But at this point, the game is done. We've gotten the quotes. We have basically it all figured out. When we were basically ready to launch, we were ready to do it. And then we sort of had this realization that we'd done nothing to get to know or, become known in this community at all. So we're trying to do that. It's not totally my thing. It's different.
It's been the process of the second part of this, not just the game creation, but that's been a really wild ride to me, because the group that we meet with once a month as board game developers in this area, they were giving us all this advice, and I'm like, man, this is really daunting. Like, I don't know how to reach out to people in the game community. Like, we play games ourselves. We play a lot of complex games. We have a D&D campaign with our 13-year-old son is our DM for it. It's awesome.
Amazing.
So we play a lot of decent way. We've got some pretty serious games in our cabinet, but we don't really play with other people in the community all that often. And so I was like, I don't know how you break into this. And then just one time that I was at this playtest night, we were getting pretty close to thinking we were going to launch. We were planning to do it in October. And this friend of mine was like, before you do that, get onto this Facebook page. It's like 7,000 people who are all board game publishers. And just read through some of the comments there. That's a really great resource. And so I went on there, read through some of them. I posted something and said, like, hey guys, we're planning to launch next month. We haven't really reached out to the board game community at all. And, here's our video and, the intentions for the game and everything. And every comment, we got back like 60 comments. People were like, what are you doing? You're crazy. Like, here's what you got to do. You got to, you got to do this, then that, then that, then that.
Yeah,
and then take 6 months and
social media accounts at that point.
Oh yeah. We had no Instagram, no Facebook and everything. Yeah. And they're like, you're insane. And so, but that resource has been incredible for here's what you do. And we also didn't know, the board game community has actually sort of become, there's a pretty clear expectation if you're going to launch on Kickstarter and be accepted by the wider board gaming community. Pretty clear expectation, you should have all of your art done, which we do, fortunately. We were always going to do that, but that didn't always used to be the case. Now it's an expectation. You have to be able to, it's a pretty clear expectation to be able to ship to other countries for relatively low cost. So that means working with a distributor like Quartermaster or something to be able to figure out how to warehouse your games in Italy and in Germany, and God, who's like spending time thinking about this stuff? You just like making a board game, and then how many people you're supposed to have on a mailing list before you actually pull the trigger and launch, and how to make sure that everything gets approved by Kickstarter ahead of time. The levels of thought that are going into this now, and that's the expectation for the industry is just outrageous, and I'm really glad we waited.
So we're just trying to make sure people know this game exists and that we exist and stuff as much as we can. It's hard to penetrate through, but we've had little successes. We got that professional review that came in that we were really excited about recently. We have a few more coming, and I went to a convention, and the community has been awesome. Like, the people are so nice and supportive and stuff, but it's still like I'm so happy to shake people's hand and learn what they're doing and stuff, and have my box under my hand and be like, oh yeah, we're working on this, and but the moment it starts to feel like I'm trying to sell them on something, then it's like it's a weird feeling. Like, it's absolutely I'm used to, but we owe it to ourselves now to we need to make people know that it's there, right? Yeah. So that's what we're working on. And as soon as our plan is we sort of just cut ourselves off at this deadline of April. We'll hopefully have done the best we can by then and go for it. So April 2020.
Well,
Awesome.
We will when that comes out, we'll definitely post about it and remind folks and stuff. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm gonna start winding it down.
Okay.
I want to ask one more question. I like to throw a little put my guests on the spot at the end of interviews a little bit. So I usually do like a top 5. I wanted to ask you kind of what your favorite games were growing up. So I don't know, between the two, maybe do five or however many games you want.
What counts growing up?
When you were children, I suppose. Like before you were adults.
Yeah.
Any kind of game.
Sure.
Board games, but video games included.
Right. Well, it's a good question.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Oh, dang. I could list off a couple. I would say one of my all-time favorites is super stereotypical, but my brother and I spent probably like 5 years of our lives trying to perfect Mario 64.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my whole childhood was just like sitting in our den and trying to like get every single point on every single level. The amount of time now when I like watch our kids play video games, I'm like, yeah, maybe we should limit their screen time. And then I like look back at the childhood, like, oh no. That's definitely somewhere on the list for me. So you go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, so I would have been like 7 or 8, I think, when my grandparents got me original Nintendo system. And it came with Super Mario Brothers and The Legend of Zelda. And then The Legend of Zelda is the one where it is like it just like imprints in your heart on something.
100%. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, like where suddenly the moment the sun comes up on a Saturday, I would be like sneaking out of the bedroom and like having the whole map spread out in front of me. And like looking back on it, I was like not good at this game, but it was like I didn't know how all my friends were playing, like beating it all the time because I was like slowly plodding through this. But it is like now I go back and play it, and it's like it's still a really really cool game. But it's like that feeling that I just sort of know for the rest of my life, that like sense of real adventure and excitement with something like that. So that one was a big one. And then I think, I was Magic the Gathering. Maybe also, which I sort of, now it's like I'm even sort of reluctant to say it because people think that I'm actually like a sophisticated Magic player, which I'm not. I haven't been for years. I was in the like revised and then 4th edition and stuff, that sort of stage where like, and instead of building a perfect deck, it was more like I would save up for 3 weeks and I would get like the second Sarah Angel or something that was and then suddenly my deck was so much better because I had 2 of her instead of 1. But that like, and I think the strategy of that game is beautiful, right? And I think it's not something. It's a common idea now where people still try to sort of capture that experience where you don't have to actually spend your real money, but still that tactic of building something. It's like in my heart, like for this game, Mantis Falls, I want to say it's like inspired by Resistance and Magic the Gathering, really, like because it's nothing like Magic the Gathering, but it's still sort of that tactical feeling that I remember so fondly. So that's 2 for me. So my family were not game players growing up. I started playing games really seriously when Adrian and I got together, and it was like a breath of fresh air. It's like I've been underwater for like my whole life. And still when I go back home, my whole family, I'll be like, do you want to play a game? Like a really, really simple one. And they'll be like, I don't know. Like, I'm just too tired of that. And I'm like, come on. But there were some really weird ones that stuck out for me. So that old Nintendo system came with a plug-in that was like, there was the running mat and then there were the guns.
Yeah. Crap, I remember that. Yeah, Dog Hunt. Yep.
In a racing game. And oh my God, I don't think I ever got so strong as when I became dedicated to winning that racing game. Like, no one can run as fast as my legs can run in a single place. Like, I couldn't run distance for shit, but like, I could run in one place as well.
Turning it out. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that just reminded me. I didn't mean to cut you off. But then, original Gran Turismo was a big one for me on the PlayStation. I remember, I got the little like $40 cheap Logitech steering wheel or something. And I remember, I'd have like one friend that was really into it with me, and we would collaborate trying to, do those stupid challenges to get it, and you'd have to run the same race like 80 times to get like the upgrade to your car, and we would do it together, and that was very fun memory. And also, and then the Final Fantasy series, certainly.
Oh yeah,
good one.
Final Fantasy 7 is, this is like an embarrassing story, but I remember Yeah, like trying to describe to my mom, I would have been like, I don't know, like 14 or 15 years old, like trying to describe to her in like long detail this relationship that Cloud had with Eris. And her saying something like, "Ooh, like seems like somebody really has like feelings for this."
Yeah. That's one of your favorite games ever.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I was probably around the same age when I got that game, and oh my god, changed my life. You know, I think I had 3 strategy guides for it. You know.
Yeah, that was such a beautiful game where it is like, yeah, I'm trying to describe that to people who didn't get it, where it's like, yeah, like you're going around and you're like killing monsters and stuff, but like if you were to really play it, like this is like really, you know, speaking to me somehow. Yeah,
a lot of emotion to it for sure.
Yeah,
I'd say King's Quest was one that I played on the computer.
Old school, yeah. Nice
that was like every holiday when all of our cousins would come over, everyone would just gather around and be like, try that and click that, and then like try going left again. Seventh Guest was another. My brother and I like. I don't know if you guys ever played, but that was my god!
I'm not familiar with that.
It's a classic, and we got it on our emulator now. It's like,
sweet.
Oh my god, so weird. And I think it did something to define the genre back then, but I don't remember.
Oh, it incorporated cutscenes. Like it had actual video in the. It wasn't just cutscenes. It was like you click and your character walks over, but she was an actual like video recording of a person. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal when it came out, and it's a horror puzzle solving game that's actually like there's still a puzzle I can't get past. Like, have never been able to get it. And like, it's not the kind of thing where you could just like look it up online either. Like, you have to actually be smart enough to beat the computer at this thing, and I'm definitely not.
Yeah.
It's really good. But then I had another one in my mind, and now I've forgotten it. Anyway.
I think we did 5.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Those are all good picks.
I appreciate it. It's always good to like hear kind of somebody who's created something where that came from, you know, like that type of thing. That's why I kind of throw this out at the end. But so I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything that you want to, you know, where people can find you? We'll just go over this again, like where people can find you, any shout outs or plugs that you want to do, anything like that before we.
I think the big one would just be aware of our game, right? Like we've been working on it, but now if you Google Distant Rabbit Games, our website should come up. It's also distantrabbitgames.com. We have you can search for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
It used to be if you Google Distant Rabbit, you would get a bunch of you get a bunch of
right.
It's people who are concerned that the rabbits seem distant lately. It's a lot of metaphors.
It's adorable.
That's great.
Very strange and
kind of
specific.
clincher of like why we named Distant Rabbit that, because when Adrian was going through, he was like, I looked this up and it doesn't seem like there's like there's any content violation or like anything, but there are a lot of people who seem worried that the rabbit is being distant.
Yeah. But yeah, so all social media, distantrabbitgames.com, right? We'll try to keep everybody updated. Certainly, I mean, if you go there, you can see a promo video where you get a pretty good sense of what the game is. We have the manual up there that you can see. And then the Kickstarter, right? I mean, if you follow us on anything or sign up for our mailing list, then you'll obviously have a chance to be informed when we launch it.
In terms of thanks, like, I mean, our friends and family really they were very patient with us for all the time that we were creating this, and then also play tested. Like Adrian's family has play tested so much for this. And then we have a few, like our friends at Keymaster, who've been really helpful in organizing playtest nights for us. And then also sort of like trying to help guide us along the industry. You know, you'd think like it would feel like competition. We're both board game developers and, you know, like they're going to, you know, they don't want people to buy us over them. And not at all. Everyone has been just the most friendly and helpful that I could have asked for. So
that's awesome.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll have all the links, you know, that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, we'll put all that up and
all your socials and so forth.
Great. Thank you so much.
So anyway, congratulations on a really well done product here.
Thank
yeah,
you.
hang on to it for a while and play it.
Yeah.
We're not in any
Yeah,
rush.
I was gonna say, I don't say this lately. I want to play
Awesome.
another round of it later on today.
Yeah.
A couple of rounds.
That'd be awesome. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah, we'll have to play full circle.
All right.
The next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
It's meeting you two this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that Kickstarter in April 2020. And, you know, Juli Bierwirth, Adrian Kerrihard, thank you so much for joining us. I've been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined in the studio by Scott Thurlow.
I've been Scott Thurlow. Thank you, Julie and Adrian. And check out Mantis Falls. And we'll have all the info for you on when this goes out live.
Yep, have a good one.
Thank you for joining the Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows and more, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.